Welcome to the Holistic Psychiatrist Podcast, a place for inspiration, insight, and information on holistic mental health. Join your host, Dr. Alice Lee, and discover critical information on safe, effective psychiatric medication withdrawal. Explore new ideas that enlighten and expand the mind with cutting-edge authors and experts, along with former patients as they share their miraculous healing journeys. It's time to build your well-being from the thought up. It's time for the Holistic Psychiatrist Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Alice Lee.
Hello and welcome to the Holistic Psychiatrist Podcast. Building well-being from the thought up creates miraculous healing journeys. I'm your host, Dr. Alice Lee, the holistic psychiatrist practicing in Stamford, Connecticut. Today we have a very interesting topic, and I'm really happy to have Emily join us as a collaborator. We're going to have our conversation on the topic of restoring your life after coming off psychiatric medications. A lot of times when people are placed on psychiatric medications and once they're successfully withdrawn from them, it's very difficult to adjust to the changes that can happen. Emily and I want to talk about all the different nuances and different layers associated with that kind of situation, because oftentimes our identity and habits are cemented during that period when we're on medications or a time when we are struggling with mental health issues. So once you are well, you have your health back and you are off your medications, there are certain challenges that can happen that we wanted to talk about. So welcome, Emily, for being part of the show.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really great topic. I think it's something that surprises a lot of people, maybe. I know for me personally, it was something that really took me by surprise. But my goal was to get off medications, to get through withdrawal. And then I had a couple really great months, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but I think I was trying to play catch up in life before I realized, wow, there's a lot to uncover here. Like you said, it's very, very layered. So hopefully this will be a good topic for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. So let's start with the aftermath of years of psychiatric treatment. Once that is over, and let's say this individual has been able to come off their medications, oftentimes there's this sense of, okay, everything's done. We'll just move forward with life as if nothing bad has ever happened. But of course, that's not exactly how it works. And I think it's helpful for us to start with how that whole experience affects our identity, our habits, how we feel about ourselves, our self-image after being on medications for many years and having had a label such as major clinical depression or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. What you think are some of the challenges that can come after years of being on medication?
Yeah, I'm sure that it's different for every single person, but I think that there are probably some very universal experiences. One of which I think for me is lack of confidence for various different reasons. But by the time you go through withdrawal, you get off medication, you've seen some sort of a story similar to trial and error with medications, finding medication or multiple medications that work for a little while, don't work, having to go off some, back on others, oftentimes even a different diagnosis. I started out with one diagnosis and then it changed because that psychiatrist could not find medications that would work for me. So it's just this journey of up and down and up and down. And then you go through withdrawal, which oftentimes can be horrific. It really takes a toll on your confidence. I know when I was finally free of the withdrawal, free of medications, initially it was, I feel great. I am so excited to be able to do life. And then within a couple months, it was, what's going on here? There's a lot of deep-seated issues that I really had to dig into. Then it was like a year later, I reached back out and I thought I had it all figured out, that I was self-sabotaging. But that's really not what it was. We had to uncover years of what I went through and work through that. But yeah.
There's a lot of losses and a lot of negative experiences that come with having struggled with mental illness. One of the things that can make us feel less supported is a sense of isolation, because when we struggle with mental illness, sometimes we lose relationships And sometimes we feel in some ways that it's hard for other people to understand our situation. So there's a lot less ability to make connections with other people because when they're treated a certain way, both by the staff there and maybe they have experience with fellow patients that are on the ward, some of these experiences are outside of what people who've never experienced those kinds of situations will have a hard time relating to. So I think that when you count the losses in one's life, having lost maybe opportunities to move forward with careers or marriage or having kids, I think that the aftermath of years of psychiatric treatment and or mental health issues, that people feel they're in a very different spot compared to their peers and colleagues.
Yeah, even hearing you talk about it, I get this feeling in my stomach because I know that feeling so well. It's a very hard thing to face, to accept this idea of loss and losing so much. And the isolation aspect of it is very real. I was very fortunate to still have my family support, but I read countless stories of people who are fully isolated. They don't even have very much support from family or anybody. So it's a really hard thing to contend with. And you basically feel like you're starting over. You are starting over from scratch. And that's a very scary thing to face. If you look at it like a whole big mountain of starting over, that's a very difficult to find the motivation to how do I tackle this kind of thing, I think.
So there's so many aspects of starting over that requires a huge amount of courage and faith in oneself. So that is something that is part of the recovery process, having faith in yourself and having the courage to know that what you did is worthy and is a good path. Because there's so many times that with the conventional psychiatric paradigm, the belief is that you have to be on medications in order to stay stable in the long term. I wanted to move on to talking about the kinds of things that often happen after coming off psychiatric medications, even if it was a safe and smooth withdrawal process. So, for example, our reactions are kind of learned responses, and some of the things that we do are ingrained habits that have developed over the course of recovery, being on medications and then coming off the medications. One of the things, for example, that often happen after people get off medications is constantly monitoring their emotional state.
Yeah.
And if you're really happy or you're enjoying yourself, I think sometimes you think, oh, am I getting manic? For someone who has bipolar disorder, for example, or if there's crying and they feel sad because of a legitimate reason, they wonder, am I getting depressed?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I always described it as I feel like I am just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And you're hypervigilant, monitoring everything. Beyond that, I think that for some people, it can be confusing. How do you distinguish like a true depressive episode from this was a really hard day, I'm feeling really down? I know for me, I was terrified of any kind of sadness. And it's PTSD, essentially, I think. And you're, like I said, you're hypervigilant. Even if it's subconscious, some days you're living in this kind of fearful state of what happens next. Nobody teaches you what to do because, like you said, most people are told that these medications they'll have to be on for the rest of their lives. So even when you're feeling good, you're waiting. You're like, okay, but how long is this going to last?
People who've been on medications have had their feelings kind of flattened for many years. I hear a lot from my patients when they get off their medications that their feelings are coming back, that they can feel things and they're happy and they can be sad and they're grateful for it. But what you're talking about with respect to PTSD, I find that kind of a fascinating metaphor of what is really going on, except for the PTSD isn't an external trauma that you have to deal with. It's an internal trauma because you've been dealing with one's internal milieu of emotions and thoughts and how to control them. So the trauma is coming from within a lot of times. And so you may not trust yourself. And after having one's emotions be very flat, any kind of oscillation with your emotions not only require adaptation, but you have to get away from pathologizing it all the time, right?
And it's a hard thing to do, I think. I wish I could think back to the very first moments I started having some of these realizations of what was going on after medication for me. But it really is a journey. It's a slow journey to rebuild, to recognize these things. It takes off some of the weight, blaming yourself, to sit back and realize, wow, I went through a lot. I battled a lot, and sit with that and really recognize what you've been through, what this could be, instead of the panic that it's all going to come back. So I guess the question really is, what happens when a patient does go through this? They go through these different kind of layers. How do they start recognizing these things? How do they start overcoming and looking at their future instead of just seeing this big, scary rebuilding thing in front of them, this massive thing they have to tackle? Where do you even begin?
Yeah. I think that you did the right thing reaching out to me and for us to walk that journey together. So you have all of the advantages of having the experience, but also having someone who can objectively observe and help you through that experience. But other than that, I think that one of our key tools for healing are some of the energy techniques that are freely available on my website, whether it's the Empower Energy technique, whether it's energy breaths. Patients will have a hard time doing on their own, but just using EET, the Empower Energy techniques, and working on whatever particular issue is in need of help, I think can make a lot of difference with the healing process. I also think that even though patients can get off medications, there are certain things that happen after one gets off medications for about 2 or 3 months that we have to be watchful for. And that is the hormones. Hormones are very slow. They're like glaciers that slowly move along, and the change is very gradual. And neurotransmitters are like little bunny rabbits. They're like really quick and they can kind of bounce around all over the place. When we focus on medications that affect mental health, a lot of times my focus has been on neurotransmitters, but I'm learning that there is a crossover between these medications' effects on neurotransmitters and their effects on hormones. So when people start to struggle about 2 or 3 months after they get off medications, sometimes what I'm seeing is that their hormones are requiring some support at that time. But beyond that kind of watchfulness after people get off medications and making sure that they are continuing to heal physiologically, I think psychologically, we have to deal with PTSD symptoms. So being fearful that all the time that the other shoe will drop. So one of the things that can be a social stressor for people when they really don't know how strong and resilient they are in any given situation is maybe fear that they might relapse and end up in the hospital or something like that. It's also important for individuals to have a method that can heal at the subconscious level. And that's where the Empower Energy technique can be really helpful, because you can understand the issues, but you can also heal it at the energy level with the EET that's on my website. You have to deal with these issues one step at a time. One of the things that I noticed when you started to blossom was more social engagement. You started to find lots of ways to develop new hobbies, new things that you enjoy, your business, how to work, how to make a living. Those are things that progress over time. And I think it's very important for people to give themselves time to decide what they want to do with their lives and start, as you say, over again, but with all of the wisdom and all of the depth of compassion and empathy that one gains from having walked through that healing process.
Yeah, I reached a point where I recognize I'm lonely. There was so much time where I was perfectly content spending time with my family when I had the energy. And of course, this is all post coming off medication, after even a year after going through withdrawal. And I think the one thing for me personally that helped is I didn't rush it. But what I did try to do was recognize those feelings when they came up. So I remember first feeling, wait a second, I think I'm starting to feel I don't think this is sadness. I think I'm lonely. I think I've recovered quite a bit and I want to be able to share life with people again. So I slowly started to figure out ways to meet new people, doing different, like you said, different activities and stuff. And it was terrifying. I tell you, it was absolutely terrifying. I remember the first time going to a group thing. I am into caving and I hadn't done it for years and years. And I was going to a new group gathering, didn't know anybody. I almost turned around 10 times. It was like a 2-hour drive. It was a camp out. We were camping there. I didn't know anybody. I was terrified. But I went and I'm so glad I did. And it just completely changed my life for the better in terms of the social aspects, but also it allowed me to start building confidence as well. That confidence that I lost over 10 years or so. I do think that's a really important thing, but also when you're ready to do it, and there's never going to be a perfect time. You might still be very scared and nervous, but it does make a huge difference to start getting involved in things and activities again. So absolutely.
I think that's a great insights because I think it can help patients come off medications and are recovering to know that feeling lonely isn't always a bad thing. It may be a signal that you're ready to start to poke your head out and make some friends. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
One of the things right after coming off meds, though, is what I've seen as a pattern for a lot of patients is maybe overdoing it a little bit because you're coming off meds. Your body has just struggled with a lot of inflammation and oxidative stress during the times when mental health was an issue. One of the things I ran across were patients feeling great, but then they start piling a lot of fun things on their plate and having lots of activities which can stress their system. So I think what you said is taking it easy initially might be a good thing.
Yeah, very easy to burn out, I'm sure, doing too much. And that leads to more up and down and not really sure what you're doing. I didn't personally deal with that much. I was still having sessions with you at the time. And I think that's something you warned me of when I was doing really well. And I was like, I have this planned and I'm doing this with work. And so there was that reminder to, that's all very good, but remember to take time for yourself, to allow your body to rest. Yeah.
The other thing that can happen is when patients get to that almost like a pinnacle of health where they're off their meds and they're on some supplements, they're doing energy baths and 3 months goes by and they're still doing really well, is that they can start to be a little bit less watchful about taking the nutritional regimen, and they can be less watchful about doing the energy breaths. And when they do that, then they don't have the physiological supports and they don't have the energy medicine to help them with the energy supports. And they can very subtly and very gradually start to lose their health that way too. And another thing that I notice as a pattern with a lot of patients is that they start to not be as watchful or careful about their diet as well. So these are all different kind of natural things that people start sliding into that in the end can cause them to feel tired or not be able to sleep as well or feel less positive emotionally.
What's your advice there for when patients start recognizing that they're slipping, they're falling out of those habits that are the foundation, what helps support them? Because I know for some people, they might catch it as it's just starting to happen. I've been through this personally, almost when it feels too late. And then it feels like too much to have to try to go back to doing everything all at once. So what's your advice for people who get there?
First of all, I think it's very important for them not to feel guilty and beat themselves up over it because it's a very natural process. I think it's very important for them to just simply remember that these nutritional regimens are very powerful and the energy breaths are very powerful. These aspects are part of the education of the healing process when I work with patients so that patients can start trusting the supplements and trusting the energy work. And the first thing, of course, is to remember that it was powerful and then just go back to the regimen, doing your energy breaths. giving it at least a week to get going and reassess yourself and make sure that you're moving in the right direction. And most people within a week will start to notice that they have better energy, they're sleeping better. Of course, the diet is important for some individuals because they tend to be very hypersensitized to wheat and dairy and white refined sugars. So those are just the basics of self-care. And then rest, giving them enough rest and pulling back from maybe overdoing it. I think for a lot of people, that in and of itself will be enough to allow patients to notice that they're moving in the right direction, and they'll just continue to take the supplements and continue. But the other thing is at that point to be introspective and ask oneself what is going on that is creating, perhaps, as you called it, self-sabotage. Sometimes it's really about one's relationship with oneself. How do you want to take care of yourself? A lot of times in the past, the paradigm is I can take a pill and this pill will take care of me. I can then do anything I want with my health, eat bad food or not take supplements, and then everything will be fine. So that kind of paradigm is tempting because it seems like an easy thing to do, to just take a medication and have your life, quote, all better, right?
Yeah. And it's very different from going to having to take a pill to working at your mental health. You have to really work. And I think that it's very easy, the age we live in, to just have all this, like all the influencers and everybody talking about this diet and this health thing and that health thing. What's worked best for me is when I fall off, specifically talking about the diet. I think what's worked best for me is just focusing on getting enough water. It's if I have completely gone off all of it, all I'm going to do is focus on one thing. And then once I do that for a little bit, I'm like, good, pat myself on the back, add one more thing. And it's so much easier than looking at the big picture. I think it can become very overwhelming to look at all this stuff we have to do. But the fact of the matter is, I think in order to lead a healthy life in terms of mental health, physical health, it is work. And unfortunately, we live in the world where it's take a pill and you'll feel better.
The other thing was that by taking the nutritional regimen, you're continuing to heal maybe decades and decades of underlying causes that have nothing to do with neurotransmitters and has everything to do with your immune system, your gut issues, maybe cardiovascular health. All of those things are consistently improving as you continue to take care of yourself. So one of the things I wanted to talk about are the different things about mental illness that changes our sense of our relationship with ourselves, whether we value ourselves, whether we love ourselves. So the three major aspects of mental illness that I believe undermine a sense of identity are the symptoms, the medications, and the psychiatric system. I'm talking about is it's very highly likely that the symptoms will be interpreted as that's who I am. So let's say if a person has struggled with schizophrenia, psychosis, mania, depression, they might think that's who I am during those periods. I yelled at my kids or I overspent. All of those different things start to sink into one's sense of this is actually who I am, when it's part of the actual mental health issue. The medications undermine our identity because medications affect how we think, how we feel, and oftentimes our identity is based upon how we think and feel. We start to think that's who I am. And then the psychiatric system creates this ongoing dependency, labeling, stigma. The doctors feed you information about why you can't ever get better. So then, of course, you start to feel that you're not as healthy as other individuals who don't have a chronic medical condition. So what are your thoughts about how either those three aspects of having mental health issues affect our identity, or do you have some other thoughts about other things that can affect our identity?
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you were saying. You just very briefly touched on this. When you're starting to get better, it's not just recovering from coming off medication. Even if the withdrawal was smooth for you, you've got everything you just mentioned and years of underlying issues to still sort through. I think it's a really amazing thing to recognize. I think if you're able to recognize the system, the medication, all of that, this isn't all just you. That's the beginning of healing, I think, because we come off the medications and we still have to heal. And I think that's really where it begins, is recognizing all of this and that it does become a part of our identity. And you're having to go back in time and discover who you were before all of this, maybe find that childlike happiness, and you're untangling that identity. It's all woven together with what your true identity is. We're learning more and more about ourselves every year that we live. So there's still plenty of time to learn and who you are. But yeah, I think it's a very difficult thing to unwind and untangle because it does become a part of your identity for sure.
And I think that over time, it's inevitable as one continues to maintain one's health that your confidence will start to build. Because you've healed the symptoms, you're no longer taking the medications, you're out of the system. So you're constantly being exposed to waking up each day, being in a different situation. And at some point, I think that patients who have been able to recover and get out of the psychiatric system start to say, I've waited all this time for the shoe to drop and it hasn't dropped. So maybe I should go out the door and try caving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's essentially what happened for me, I think. Definitely. It was like, okay, it's not happening. There's still challenges. Life is just a long string of challenges, I think. For most people, that's just the way that life is. But yeah, that other shoe never did drop.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we support that healing process? How can we help strengthen and support the changes that occur that are positive, that can fundamentally support a better sense of self and identity? One of the things that we did talk about is allowing oneself to build more friendships. And this time, friendships that are hopefully very supportive and strengthening, as opposed to friendships superficially. Because when one is hiding one's mental health issues from others, then the stigma and the privacy issues, I think, makes it harder for you to really connect to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that you and I had discussed previously, because when I first started coming out of my shell, recognizing the loneliness, wanting to make new friends and stuff, I recognized that the first couple encounters were very surface level. I was really struggling to meet people that I felt that I really connected with. But I think that's probably pretty natural for people in general, not only people who have been through chronic illness. I think that it is a difficult thing to find people that you really, truly connect with, like on a soul level, and do feel that they can understand the things that you've gone through, if that's something you want to talk to people about. But that doesn't mean that those surface level friendships, different relationships, acquaintances are not important. I think for me, honestly, because it had been so long and I had lost so many different types of relationships over the years, it was almost like good practice being able to get over the fear of having to be out talking to people, stuff like I just got more comfortable with it. And there were a lot of really good people that I met. It's just we didn't connect. It was talk about what's going on in the town that I live in, or maybe a little bit too gossipy for me or something, but still just good people. But it allowed me to keep getting out of my house. It allowed me to break the patterns that I had gotten so stuck in. But that's something that I hope people keep in mind, that it's not easy to find those deep connections, but you just have to keep going. You have to keep trying, try different groups, try different outlets, but it's a very normal thing, having talked to so many other people that move to new cities and are trying to make new friends. But they're out there, and it's worth it to put yourself out there.
One of the perspectives I have, just because I have more of this objective way of looking into people's recovery process, is to help people to understand that even though it was very difficult to experience mental health issues and withdrawal or whatever they've suffered from, that it is also a potential gold mine in terms of one's wisdom. You can be much wiser. The healing process makes you a lot more informed as an individual about holistic matters. You have to understand that it's not just wasted time. It's actually time that if you go back and look at it from a different perspective, I think it can yield a lot in terms of personal benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the further and further you get away from it, the more time that has separated you from that, there will be those kinds of realizations that you're talking about. I think another big one is empathy towards others, because so many of us spend so much time in isolation and people not understanding or trying to understand, but unless you've lived it or been right next to someone living it, it is a hard thing to understand. So you recognize that person who was really rude to you for seemingly no reason whatsoever. We don't know what's going on in their lives. So I think ultimately it's hard to say, but goodness that can come out of it. And I think it's really important to try to focus when you're able to. So I think it can be really difficult sometimes to look at this experience. For so many people, it is a really horrific experience to go through withdrawal and years of medication. But I know one thing that's helped me, talking to others, having been in the different groups and stuff, I do know for many people, really focusing on those positive things. It's hard to look at it when you're still in it, but there is quite a bit of positivity that can come out of it. At the end of the day, what else do you do? What are the other choices to just sit and dwell and be angry? And we can only spend so much time being angry at the things that we went through. I think it really eats at us. So I think choosing your perspective makes a big difference in healing.
Spiritual perspective, I think that one of the biggest things that we can work on as human beings is compassion towards ourselves. One of the challenges with having any kind of chronic health issue, doesn't have to be mental health, but any kind of chronic health issue, having compassion and kindness to ourselves and being able to look at our situations, perhaps our shortcomings or weaknesses, and be able to take care of ourselves as a loving mother towards her baby, instead of chewing ourselves out for not meeting our standards or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like you said, being kind to yourself, allowing yourself grace, and recognizing too that a lot you went through is not your fault. You got thrown into it that wasn't helpful and ended up hurting more than it helped. So, yeah.
So we've talked about some of the adaptations that are helpful for starting anew. These are things that obviously require motivation, some courage. I want people to know that other people also feel anxious and struggle with these changes in their lives. So for them not to think I'm the only one that is struggling with making new friends now that I'm doing better, and just keep trying. What about careers and jobs and those kind of issues? I would imagine that because of mental health or other health issues, people have mental health issues due to Epstein-Barr virus, for example, or Lyme disease. But let's say they're able to heal from a viral or bacterial infection and they're getting back on their feet and they're unemployed and dependent on other people to support them financially. What are some of the things that can be helpful to get them back on the right track when it comes to careers and jobs and feeling more financially and socially back to where they want to be?
I think this is a big one, because taking it from the perspective of myself and also from my sister, who had a traumatic brain injury and put her back, way, way back in her life. It's one of those things I think that people tend to beat themselves up about the most, and trying also to play catch up the most. It's easier with rebuilding the social aspect of your life, I think. And of course, you have plenty of experience with other patients where you've seen this, and you might have other stories of how people have dealt with it, but I think that it's the easiest place where you can start burning out, where you can be too hard on yourself, where that sort of unhealthy perfectionism can come into play. I know for myself, I've had to do it numerous times, not only with the medication, but also I have endometriosis. So that set me back in life several times as well. I personally approach it the same way now, having been many ups and downs with it, but now I tend to approach it the same way I do everything else. It's like, just start with the water. Just start with very small things. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I know that if I just go sit at my computer and do just top of my list, priority list, it's just rebuilding. It's another aspect of rebuilding. I don't personally have any sort of perfect advice to give anybody, but it is, I think, just taking small little bites instead of looking at the whole big picture. But what I have learned is you can start over again and again and again in life. You absolutely can. And just because something has come up doesn't mean that you will always have an opportunity, even if it's very, very difficult. You will always have an opportunity to start over. So I think for a long time, there was this fear that I'm going to mess it up. If I mess it up, this is my last chance. There's no other chance out there. But I have messed things up and I just get up and do it again.
Yeah. And as you're talking, a lot of different patients and their lives came into mind for me. One highlight or summary of these examples that came to mind was that a lot of my patients came in with different backgrounds and then they left after having healed, choosing occupations that were very different from what they experienced before they healed. For example, a big example was a lady who had a degree in law and she had stopped practicing law, but in her heart, she's always loved to dance. And so after she healed, she started her own ballet instruction school. And
I love that. It makes my heart happy. I really love that.
yeah. There were other different examples. There was a young man who was doing very poorly because of mental health issues and was failing school, had a suicide attempt, very depressed and anxious. He got better. He went on to college, did well, applied to Bastyr University, got his ND degree, naturopathic doctor degree, went on to do a fellowship in acupuncture. Now he's a holistic doctor.
Wow.
And helping people. And of course, using a lot of his gifts, which is another thing that I wanted to mention, that a lot of my patients became ill because I compare them to a very fine surgical instrument versus a hammer. People who have that beautiful aspect of themselves, like a delicate surgical instrument, shouldn't be used as a hammer. And sometimes because of the toxins and infections and all sorts of challenges and stressors in our Western environment, it's like using a surgical instrument and banging it as if it were a hammer. People who have that kind of innate physiological build, when they get better, one of the things that I discover is that they tend to be very creative, extremely intelligent. When they're well, they can use those skills with their creativity, their intelligence to move on in fields that maybe is perfect for a surgical instrument, as opposed to the hammers that are out there that, withstand all the toxins and the stressors. They can go out and do amazing things with their talents. The young man who became an ND, he discovered that he could feel the energy of whatever he holds in his hand. Very soon as he got off all his meds, he could feel the vibratory energy of rocks and minerals.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yes. And to be that sensitive is very interesting.
You wonder, people who are that sensitive, how all of this does affect them negatively. Like you said, so that makes that analogy stand out in my head even more. Yeah, absolutely.
And they're very sensitive to other people's emotions too. So a lot of people who are healing through my practice tend to be very empathetic to other people's energies. And so as they get stronger, to be those individuals who can really sense what other people need emotionally to help them, and also sense the energies of the room and be able to gauge what's going on in a room much more sensitively than maybe other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you suggested it to me, and it may have been another patient who was doing it. But when I started being social again, almost getting anxiety sometimes around certain types of people, certain types of energies, and just stepping away, going into the bathroom and doing very short energy breaths seemed to really help with that. So there are, I think, a lot of different methods to help with that sensitivity if it becomes overwhelming when you first start putting yourself out there.
For people who want to find these techniques, they're under the energy medicine techniques section on my website, which is under the tab called information. So if they go to the energy medicine techniques, they can learn and even download the recording for energy breaths, because it's helpful for my patients to do the EET, the Empower Energy Techniques, to deal with whatever issues that they want to change, whether it's a belief, whether it's to help them heal from past traumas. So I just highly recommend that they use that as a kind of fix-it-all kind of tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've used it in so many different ways when you were just focusing on kind of the psychological and emotional aspects of rebuilding your life post coming off the meds.
Yeah, because that first time around, we were really just focused on medication side of things, but it is so incredibly useful for every aspect of life. Definitely.
Talking about the empathy, I had one example of a young woman who just got off her medications. She was on a benzodiazepine. She was dependent on marijuana. She was on an SSRI for years. She went to a retreat. My assumption of a retreat is you'll come back all radiant and refreshed. She came back all anxious and unhappy about how she was emotionally. And it turned out upon exploration, because I was thinking maybe this is just withdrawal. She's having withdrawal issues. But it turned out that she had many experiences at the retreat that was very stressful for her. And there were experiences where other people's perhaps anxieties were felt by her as well. So it didn't turn out to be restful at all. It was engaging her in ways that were too challenging, I think, a little bit too abrupt in terms of changing her life. One example was that this individual never felt seen. She never felt like she was really truly seen for who she was. And when she went to the retreat, the very first exercise that they did with just picking a random partner who she didn't know was to stare into each other's eyes for 90 seconds. And she felt very uncomfortable. She says it was like being naked in front of someone all of a sudden and being in that way. And it made her feel overseen.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Maybe what we could do at this point is maybe share some personal advice on how to create a new life with greater self-confidence. If we want to summarize everything that we could to give to someone who's looking for help and support, what would we boil it down to? Who wants to go first? Emily, do you want to go first, or do you want me?
Yeah, yeah. It's a difficult thing to give advice for, but I think that we touched on all the major points. Number one, I think been through in life and giving yourself credit for that and sitting with that often. Yeah. I think that it has been one of the most beneficial things for me when I start getting really hard on myself or feeling down, is go sit on my back porch and just relax and really think about what I've been through and what I've overcome. Just allowing yourself grace, knowing you're going to mess up, taking one small thing at a time, whether it's getting back on the diet or building new friendships, a new social life, and knowing that if you fail this time, it doesn't mean that it's the end. It's opportunity to try again. So it's a lot of, I know what I'm saying is a lot of words we hear from people all over the world, but I think they all ring true in this situation, definitely.
From my perspective, already a foundation for greater self-confidence is actually going through the holistic healing process itself. In many ways, the healing process is very challenging because you are not just popping one pill a day and that's it. The healing process requires rigorous self-discipline. You have to be organized with your regimen. You have to do your energy breaths. You have to go in for those weekly sessions with a doctor and apply what you've learned. You have to look at yourself introspectively. There's so many different skills that are condensed into those few months of the healing process. And the person is gradually able to see how the body innately can heal on its own when you just have faith in the process. So when you come off these medications and you remain well, my hope for patients to help them create a new life with greater self-confidence is to remember what they've already accomplished and to recognize that they're a miracle walking on two legs. And not to forget that if you can truly accomplish the healing process, you can accomplish anything else that you set your mind to, because you've just done something that everybody else says is impossible to do.
Yeah.
That is what I want people to come away with, is to know that, number one, they can take all of the difficulties and challenges that they've experienced and transform it into benefits for them. And number two is that once they've healed, they can take a look at the healing process itself and acknowledge the amount of work that they've done and take confidence in that as they move on with other kinds of projects that they want to take on to help rebuild their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. I want to really thank Emily's Insights, and I'm glad that we were able to cover all of these aspects of restoring one's life after coming off meds. I want to thank all of those who have listened to this podcast. I hope that everything that we've shared can give you hope and greater courage to move on with your life and to be gentle with yourself. For those of you who want to learn more about the holistic psychiatry approach, a lot of information is on my website, which is holistic.com. And there are podcasts there. There's energy medicine tools that you can use. And there's a lot of articles there that can help with you understanding about the medication withdrawal process. For those of you who want to access high quality supplements, there is a section under the products section which will allow you to sign up for FullScript, which offers a lot of high quality supplements and provides also a small reimbursement to me when you order from the FullScript signed up under me. So I really appreciate those who sign up. All the different topics that we cover on this Holistic Psychiatrist podcast, please give us a 5-star thumbs up review so that other people can learn more about our podcast. I look forward to creating more podcasts with Emily moving forward. We're really excited to be able to work together. So thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
The content provided by this podcast is for informational purposes only and has not been approved by the US FDA. This podcast is not intended to provide personal medical advice, which should be obtained from a medical professional.